Welcome, chosen ones. They are not nervous because you threatened them. They are nervous because you simply showed up. Let's be completely honest. The moment a chosen person walks into a room, something shifts in the atmosphere. Conversations lower, eyes move, smiles tighten. And the ones who pretend not to notice you are the very ones who can't stop thinking about you. There is something about the way you carry yourself, that unshakable calm, that quiet fire, that knowing in your eyes, that short-circuits the peace of people who were never built to handle your level. You don't have to say a single word. Your presence alone is an announcement, and for some people that announcement sounds like a threat. Psychologists call it involuntary exposure response. When a person witnesses someone operating without fear, without apology, without the need for permission, their ego doesn't respond with inspiration. It responds with irritation. That's not coincidence. That's psychology. That's the science of what happens when greatness enters a room full of mediocrity, pretending to be comfortable. And here is the deep truth most people never say out loud. Your enemies are not angry at you. They are angry at what you remind them of. Every time they see you walking in purpose, they feel their own wasted time. Every time you smile, they feel their own bitterness. You became the living evidence of what they refused to become. And that is the most unbearable mirror in the world. So today, we are not running from that truth. We are diving straight into the raw psychology and divine logic of why you, the chosen one, make your enemies so deeply, irrationally nervous. This is not about pride. This is about understanding why your very existence rattles the foundations of everything they built on fear. Buckle up. 1. Your calm exposes their chaos. There is a specific kind of person who cannot stand to be around someone at peace. Not because peace is offensive, but because it is revealing. When you are still while everything around you is spinning, it forces people to ask why they are still spinning, and most people are not ready for that question. Your enemies expected pressure to break you. They waited for the moment you would crack, panic, or fall apart the way they did. They watched the same storms hit you. The difference is, you learned how to breathe inside a hurricane. You found your center when everything tried to steal it from you. And when they saw you come through the storm, still standing, still steady, something in them snapped. Because your peace does not just comfort you. It confronts them. It tells them without a single word that the chaos inside their chest is not mandatory. That there was always another choice. A choice they declined. A choice you made. Every time you remain composed under pressure, you become living proof that their emotional instability was never your fault. It was their decision. And that is a truth they are not willing to accept. They will call you cold. They will say you do not care. They will mistake your discipline for distance. But deep down, they know what your stillness really means. It means you outgrew the need to react to everything. You understand that not every fire deserves your fuel. You moved from survival to sovereignty. And for people who are still hostages to their emotions, that kind of freedom looks suspicious. Almost dangerous, almost impossible, until they see it in you, and then it just looks like a reminder of what they gave up on. 2. You stopped needing their approval and it terrified them. There was a version of you that searched for their nod, that adjusted yourself depending on who was watching, that shrunk a little in certain rooms to make others feel bigger. They loved that version. They built their comfort on top of your insecurity. As long as you needed their validation, they had leverage, they had power, they had control. And then, one day, you stopped. You woke up. You realized that their applause was never going to fill what you were trying to fill, that chasing their approval was like drinking from an empty well. No matter how deep you went, you kept coming back thirsty. So you walked away from the well. And that single decision, that quiet inner revolution, destroyed everything they had built around your doubt. Manipulators cannot function without insecurity. Without your need to be liked, accepted, and included, they have nothing to offer. You were the power source. You were the battery. And the day you unplugged from their system, the whole machine went dark. That is when the nervousness began. That is when the whisper campaigns started. That is when the sudden coldness, the passive aggression, the attempts to remind you of your old self began. Because a person who no longer needs your approval is a person you cannot control. You became ungovernable, not loud, not aggressive, just free. And freedom in someone else is the most threatening thing to a person who has spent their entire life building cages. They call it arrogance. They say you changed. What they really mean is, you are no longer available to shrink for their comfort, and that makes them nervous in a way they will never fully admit but can never fully ignore. 3. Your growth forces them to confront their stagnation. People are comfortable with your struggle. They know how to relate to your brokenness. They knew the version of you that doubted, that stumbled, that questioned everything. They had a role in that story. They were the ones watching you fall and feeling secretly relieved, because as long as you stayed down, their position felt safe. Then you got up, and you kept getting up. Every time you grew, it cost them something. It cost them an excuse. Every level you reached erased one of their reasons for staying where they were. If you could do it, after everything you went through with everything working against you, then what exactly is their justification for staying stuck? That question burns them alive. Not because you asked it, but because your life asks it for you every single day just by existing. They cannot celebrate your growth because your growth is their indictment. Your healing puts their bitterness on trial. Your progress sits in the courtroom of their conscience and delivers a verdict they hate, that they chose this, that the stagnation is not a circumstance. It is a decision they kept making every morning when they chose comfort over courage, familiar over forward, easy over everything that actually matters. And so they attack, they minimize, they remind everyone of who you used to be, because who you used to be is the only version of you they can manage. The current version, the growing, healing, moving version, is too much evidence against their excuses. Your evolution is not a personal attack on them, but it feels like one, and that feeling is what turns admiration into animosity, and observation into obsession. They watch you because they cannot look away from someone who became what they abandoned. 4. You carry a light they cannot dim or duplicate. Some people spend their whole lives trying to find what you already have. That thing in you that is hard to name but impossible to ignore. The certainty, the groundedness, the sense that you know something they do not. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. You found what you were made for, or at least you are walking faithfully toward it. And that path has a glow that no amount of their noise can extinguish. They tried to copy it. They watched how you moved, how you spoke, how you carried yourself, and they tried to replicate the surface. But what they cannot copy is the root. They can imitate the posture, but not the peace that produces it. They can steal the words, but not the conviction behind them. They can observe the results, but never access the process that built them. And that inability to duplicate what you carry, that gap between what they see in you and what they feel in themselves, is precisely what makes them irrational around you. The light you carry is not decorative. It was forged. It came from darkness they never sat in, from silence they never survived, from battles they never even attempted. You earned every piece of your glow the hard way, through nights no one witnessed, through prayers that had no immediate answer, through a faith you had to rebuild from scratch with your own hands after everything collapsed. They see the light. They do not see the cost. And because they do not understand the process, they call it luck. They call it favoritism. They call it anything except what it actually is. The result of someone who refused to quit when quitting was the easiest and most reasonable option available. 5. Your silence is louder than their noise. Nothing unsettles an enemy more than a chosen one who does not engage. They throw shade and you smile. They spread rumors and you continue your journey. They wait for a reaction, for drama, for tears, for a public breakdown that confirms their narrative about you. And instead they get nothing. Just your continued existence, moving forward, unbothered, unbowed, unbroken. And that silence is deafening to someone who needed your reaction to feel relevant. They mistake your silence for weakness. They think your refusal to respond means you are afraid or defeated, or that you did not hear them. What they do not understand is that your silence is strategic. You learn that not every battle deserves your energy. Not every insult deserves an audience. Not every voice that speaks against you deserves the gift of your attention. You are too focused on where you are going to spend time defending where you have been. But here is what really eats them alive. Your silence exposes them in a way your words never could. When they attack and you do not respond, Their attack hangs in the air with no counterweight, and everyone watching sees exactly what it was. Desperation, smallness, the howl of someone who cannot reach what they are targeting. You do not need to defend yourself from people whose only power over you was your own insecurity. And once that insecurity is gone, your silence becomes your loudest statement, a declaration that their opinion is simply not the kind of currency you accept anymore. 6. You turned your wounds into weapons of wisdom. Everyone has pain. What separates the chosen from the stuck is what they do with it. Your enemies expected your pain to end you. They watched your losses, your failures, your betrayals, your lowest seasons, and they privately assumed that was the final chapter. Pain was supposed to be the last word in your story, but you did something they did not expect. You made it the opening line. You did not just survive what tried to break you. You studied it. You sat with it. You asked it what it was trying to teach you rather than just screaming at it to stop. That discipline, the discipline of turning inward when everything hurts, is not common. It is chosen. And what it produces in a person is a depth, a resilience, a wisdom that cannot be purchased, imitated, or stolen. It can only be earned by going through the fire without abandoning yourself in it. They hate that you turned what was meant to bury you into the very soil that grew your strength. They had access to the same pain. Many of them went through comparable storms, but they chose bitterness. They chose blame. They chose to hand their narrative over to whatever hurt them most and let it define the rest of their life. You chose differently. And now, every wound has become a credential. Every scar is a chapter of a story that no one can challenge because no one else lived it. You became unteachable to your enemies because you already graduated from every school they tried to trap you in. 7. You moved while they were still making plans. There are people who have been planning to start for years, planning to change, planning to build, planning to begin the thing they know they were made for, always after this season settles, always when conditions improve, always when the timing is better. And then they watch you, you who had fewer resources, you who had more obstacles, you who had every reason to wait but moved anyway, and their carefully constructed world of reasons falls apart in real time. Your action is an accusation they never asked for. Not because you meant it as one, but because action always exposes inaction. Every step you take makes their stillness louder. Every risk you take highlights how long they have been standing at the edge without jumping. They cannot celebrate your bravery because your bravery reminds them of their own procrastination. So they criticize instead. They say you moved too fast. They say you were reckless. They say you got lucky. Any narrative that places your movement in a negative light, so their avoidance does not have to feel like cowardice. But the truth is simple and devastating to every excuse they have built. You moved through the same fear they are standing in. You did not wait for the fear to disappear. You learned to walk while afraid, and that is not a small thing, that is everything. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act in spite of it. You made that decision. They keep postponing it, and every day you keep moving. The gap between your life and theirs grows wider, and so does their nervousness. 8. You refused to become what they expected. They had a story written for you, a role carefully constructed for your confusion. They needed you to be smaller, quieter, more manageable, less threatening to the image they were building for themselves. They cast you as the supporting character in their narrative, and for a while, you played it. Not because you were weak, but because you had not yet understood what you were. Then you did. And when you stepped off their stage, they lost the script entirely. Nothing disrupts a controlling person more than someone who stops being predictable. They built their sense of power on their ability to anticipate your reactions, manipulate your emotions, and keep you inside a box that was comfortable for them. When you started growing in directions they had not approved, when you started making decisions without consulting their fear, when you started living as though their opinion was not the final word, they panicked, because their identity was attached to your limitations. Your expansion was their contraction. Your rise exposed how much of their confidence had been borrowed from keeping you low, and without your smallness to compare themselves to, they had to confront the actual size of their own substance. That confrontation is what produces the nervousness, the irritation, the obsessive attention they pay to your every move while pretending not to care. They cannot write you back into their story. The character they created no longer exists. You became the author. And now your ending belongs only to you. 9. Your favor cannot be explained or cancelled. They tried everything. They gossiped. They undermined. They excluded. They sabotaged. They built invisible walls around your name and waited for the ceiling they put on your life to hold. And then they watched, confused, furious, powerless, as grace moved you forward anyway. Not because you were perfect, not because you were the loudest or the most connected, but because something was working in your life that no amount of human opposition can override when it is truly activated. Favor is the enemy of envy because it operates outside the rules that envy depends on. Envy needs a fair system, one where results follow resources, where outcomes match effort, where the person with the most connections wins. But favor does not play by those rules. It elevates the overlooked. It opens doors for people who were told the door did not exist. It makes a way when logic says there is no way. And when your enemies see that, when they realize that blocking you, dismissing you, and working against you produced nothing, they do not become inspired. They become furious. Because they cannot compete with something they cannot control. Your continued rising in the face of their resistance is not your achievement alone. It is evidence. Evidence that you are covered. Evidence that what is on your life is bigger than what is against it. And the people who built their confidence on the assumption that they could stop you are now face to face with the terrifying realization that they never had that power to begin with. You did not outmaneuver them. You outlasted them. And now every success of yours is a sentence in the story that rewrites everything they believed about their own authority over your destiny. 10. You shine brightest in the places they expected you to break. They did not just doubt you. They invested in your collapse. They spent emotional energy, social capital, and time building a mental world in which you failed. They needed that failure because without it, their envy had no logic. If you fall, then their resentment was justified. They were just being realistic. But you did not fall, you fell forward. And every time you came back stronger, you stole something from them. You stole the justification for their hate. The pressure that was meant to flatten you became the compression that turned you to diamond. The betrayal that was supposed to make you bitter became the teacher that made you better. The rejection that was designed to destroy your confidence became the direction that brought you into alignment. You did not just survive what they threw at you, you evolved because of it. And that evolution is the most maddening thing a chosen person can do to an enemy who expected destruction. Now they must live with the knowledge that the fire they lit only forged you, that the doors they closed only redirected you to better rooms, that the names they called you only sharpened the definition of who you actually are. They cannot undo what they did, and they cannot deny what you became. Every time they see you standing in your purpose, glowing, grounded, growing, they feel the full weight of the fact that they could not stop it. Nobody could. Because what is chosen does not break under pressure. It rises because of it. 11. Your solitude became your superpower. They thought the quiet season would finish you. When people left, when the crowd disappeared, when the noise went down and all that remained was you and the silence, they assumed you would beg for company, that you would spiral in the loneliness and come back crawling to familiar chaos. What they did not count on was that you had something to find in that silence. Something they had never found in theirs because they never stayed long enough to look. You met yourself, the real version. Not the one performing for approval, not the one adjusting to whoever was watching, the one underneath all of that. The one who had been waiting patiently through all the noise for a moment of quiet, where they could finally speak. And what that version told you changed everything. It told you what you were worth without an audience. It told you what you wanted without someone else's influence on the answer. It told you who you actually were when no one was defining you. That self-knowledge is what makes you so difficult to manipulate now. They cannot gaslight someone who knows themselves. They cannot rewrite the story of someone who wrote their own narrative in the silence. The isolation that was meant to weaken you became the laboratory where you were built. And the person who emerged from that season was not the same person who entered it. You came out forged, refined, clear in a way that unsettles everyone who is still walking through life in a fog of other people's opinions. Your peace did not come from perfect circumstances. It came from a season of solitude that turned a question into a calling. 12. You do not compete. You create. And that is incomprehensible to them. People who live in competition mode cannot understand someone who has stepped completely off the scoreboard. They are tracking who is winning, who is ahead, who has more followers, more money, more recognition, and they expect everyone else to be playing the same game. Then they encounter you, moving without urgency, building without comparing, focused not on who is ahead of you, but on what you are called to create, and they simply cannot process it. Your lack of rivalry reads to them as a threat, because if you are not competing, you are operating on a frequency they do not have access to. And that frequency, that purpose-driven, vision-anchored, competition-immune frequency, is the most unnerving thing in the world to someone who has built their entire identity on being better than someone else. If you are not playing the game, they cannot beat you. And if they cannot beat you, what exactly are they winning? You stopped racing the moment you understood that your lane is unique, that what you are building has no competitor, because no one else has your specific combination of calling, experience, wounds, and gifts. You are not trying to outcreate anyone. You are simply being faithful to what only you can make. And that faithfulness, that quiet, consistent, unshakable commitment to your own purpose, produces results that look effortless to the outside and feel like insanity to anyone who does not understand that the deepest work happens in the invisible. You do not compete because you do not need to. You create because you cannot stop. And that is what makes your enemies nervous every single day you are alive and building. 13. You keep winning without their permission. They thought dismissing you was enough, that keeping their circle closed, their endorsements withheld, their connections off limits would contain your potential. They believed that they held the gate to your success, that without their stamp, their network, their validation, you would plateau. So they waited. They watched from a distance with the quiet confidence of people who believe they hold the key. And then you found another door. And then you built one. And then you walked through it and arrived in rooms they had never been invited to, carrying something that no one gave you, something you grew yourself in the dark, without applause, without a roadmap, without their permission. And the arrival you made without them said everything about the lie they had been telling themselves. Their approval was never the variable. You were always the variable. And once you understood that, the equation changed completely. Now every win of yours is a conversation they did not get to have. Every open door is proof that the walls they built around your name had no foundation. Every success confirms that their power over your trajectory was always an illusion, one you believed for a while but one you eventually saw through, and seeing through it was the real victory. Not the platform, not the growth, not the recognition, but the moment you realized that the only permission you ever needed was the one you gave yourself. Everything after that was simply the world catching up to what you already decided was true about your life. 14. You are the proof that chosen cannot be cancelled. They used everything they had. Time, words, social pressure, silence, exclusion, mockery, false narratives, the full arsenal of people who confused their opinion with reality. They constructed stories about you. They distributed those stories. They waited for the damage to settle and the name to fade. And instead, something inexplicable happened. The more pressure they applied, the more refined you became. The more they tried to bury your name, the deeper your roots grew. What they did not understand, what they still do not fully understand, is that you cannot cancel what you did not create. They did not make you. They do not have authority over what you are. They have the power to disturb, but not to determine. And every time they thought they finally had you, life revealed that your assignment was one size larger than their attempt to end it. The rejection that hurt you became the redirection that saved you. The loss that hollowed you out became the space where your real calling moved in. You are not standing in your purpose, despite what your enemies did. You are standing in it partly because of it, because the resistance they provided forced you to find a strength you would never have discovered in comfortable conditions. They pushed you into the deep water, and you found out you could swim, Not just survive, swim, move, build, breathe, thrive in the very place they sent you to drown. That is the divine irony of being chosen. That is the thing your enemies cannot accept, cannot explain, and cannot stop. You are the proof that some things are simply beyond the reach of human opposition, and that proof lives in you every morning you wake up and choose again to keep going. The truth is this: you were never meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to be aligned with your purpose. And alignment with purpose creates a presence that the unaligned cannot be comfortable around. Your enemies do not hate you. They hate what you remind them is still possible. Every scar you turned into strategy, every silence you turned into strength, every season of isolation you turned into preparation, all of it has built a version of you that invalidates every excuse they have been holding on to. You did not become this by accident. You were shaped by storms they did not survive, forged by fires they refused to enter, refined by patience they ran out of. The nervousness they feel around you is not about your personality. It is about your testimony. It is about the undeniable evidence that what is placed on a chosen life cannot be cancelled, cannot be contained, and cannot be competed with. It can only be witnessed. And for those who chose smallness, witnessing your growth is the most uncomfortable thing in the world. So keep going, keep building, keep shining without apology and without explanation. Not for them, but for every person watching from the shadows who needs to see that it is possible, that the fire does not have to end you, that the silence does not have to break you, that the chosen life, however difficult, however misunderstood, however lonely at times, is worth every single step of the journey. If this reached something deep in you today, subscribe to this channel, because we come here to speak the truths that most people are afraid to say out loud. Like this video.